Does the waltz from the animated movie still echo in your mind? As Anastasia twirls in a shimmering ballroom gown? That is a beautiful lie. The real story of Anastasia does not smell of perfume and snow. It reeks of gunpowder, scorched lime, and the damp claustrophobia of a cellar. For decades, we have clung to the myth of her survival because the truth is far too harrowing to look at directly. But today, we are going down into that very mine shaft outside Yekaterinburg to finally peel back the layers of the Disney princess and find the girl behind skeleton number 4. For a long time, our collective consciousness was poisoned by the magic and curses of Rasputin, fueled by the 1997 animated hit. But the 1916 Broadway musical took a radical turn, stripping away the evil sorcerer and replacing him with Gleb, a Bolshevik officer. His father was the man who personally pulled the trigger on that fateful night. Here, there is no room for incantations, only political expediency and cold lead. While Gleb agonizes on stage, haunted by the question, "Am I my father?" the real executioners never wavered for a second. For years, the Soviet government fed the world a steady diet of misinformation, using the myth of the survivors as a cynical lever in their diplomatic games. It was a calculated trade in hope, while the bodies were quietly turning to ash in the Siberian mud. Science is not sentimental. It possesses a chilling lack of concern for the fairy tales we construct to shield ourselves from the cold. Decades of romantic fog hid the truth, and to strip it away, geneticists had to perform a feat of biological necromancy. They had to awaken blood that had been spilled long before the fires of the revolution were even a spark in the minds of the Bolsheviks. Tucked away in the climate-controlled silence of the Hermitage Museum, its vaults lay a relic of a different time. A linen shirt belonging to Nicholas II. It was a garment stained during a failed assassination attempt in the Japanese city of Otsu, all the way back in 1891. Upon that fabric lay not merely historical artifacts, but the calcified, century-old physical agony of the emperor himself. This ancient, darkened blood, dried into the fibers for over 100 years, became the ultimate key to a murder mystery that had paralyzed the world's imagination. It was more than just a sophisticated forensic test performed in sterile laboratories. It was a profound, almost spiritual reunion of father and daughter at the deepest molecular level. When the scientists compared the genetic profile extracted from that shirt to the DNA of the fragments pulled from the sulfuric acid and mud of the Ural forest, the results were bone-chillingly clear. The emperor's blood and the bones from the pit literally recognized one another across the vast, lonely span of a century. This was the moment the myth met the microscope. We often talk about the probability of error, but here, the mathematics was absolute. The odds of a mistake were 1 in trillions, a number so vast it leaves no room for the what-ifs of history. This genetic handshake between the living blood of 1891 and the scorched remains of 1918 provided a final, indisputable verdict. Mathematics, cold and unwavering, proved exactly what the human heart had spent a century refusing to accept. In that shallow, nameless pit in the Siberian woods, the miracle of survival simply did not happen. No one walked away from the cellar of the Ipatiev House. Their shared DNA serves as the final seal. The fairy tale did not just end in that cellar, it was executed. The story of Anna Anderson is not merely a tale of deception. It is a masterpiece of collective self-delusion and a haunting study of human trauma. She was not a calculated fraud in the traditional sense, but a broken woman named Franziska Szankowska, a Polish factory worker whose world had been torn apart by a single, deafening roar. The explosion at the munitions plant did more than just tear her skin. It left a permanent, high-pitched ringing in her ears that never allowed her a moment of silence. And it left her with the flickering, haunted gaze of a trapped animal looking for any exit from the cage of her own skin. When she was pulled from the Landwehr Canal in Berlin in 1920, she was a ghost in search of a haunt. In the sterile, white-tiled wards of the asylum, she realized that she could either remain a nameless, broken laborer or become a lost princess. She chose the latter, donning the mask of the Grand Duchess Anastasia like a suit of armor, fusing it to her face until the woman underneath completely vanished. Anna Anderson played her part with the desperate, white-knuckled rage of the doomed. She did not just act difficult or arrogant, she weaponized her royalty. When she shrieked at servants or threw fits of indignation, she was not channeling the blood of the Romanovs. She was trying to drown out the trembling in her own voice. Every demand for devotion was a barricade erected to hide the terrifying reality that if the world looked too closely, they would see a shivering factory girl hiding behind a curtain of stolen dignity. She used her skills of masking to survive, instinctively understanding that the more unreachable she became, the more people would believe she was born to a throne. Her defenders, including Gleb Botkin, the son of the Tsar's own executed physician, were so starved for a piece of the past that they became the architects of her legend, projecting their own grief onto her hollowed-out identity. They mistook her inability to speak Russian for a psychological block and her ignorance of family secrets as a symptom of amnesia, rather than the simple reality of her origin. But those who had truly loved the real Anastasia saw through the disguise instantly. When the Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna, Anastasia's own aunt, traveled to Berlin to confront the woman claiming to be her niece, she did not find a spark of family recognition. She looked into those eyes and saw only extinguished hope. There was no shared language, no secret childhood nod, only a desperate stranger clinging to a role she could not afford to lose. Anderson's performance was so convincing because she had successfully lied to the most important audience of all, herself. She did not just pretend to be Anastasia, she became the myth, using the coldness of a princess to mask the shaking of a victim. Decades later, science finally performed the inevitable surgery on her legacy. In 1994, DNA tests on tissue samples preserved from her life were compared to the Shanskowski family. The match was not just perfect, it was a mathematical execution of the lie. The mystery was solved, yet the tragedy remained. Anna Anderson died in Virginia still clutching the mask, because without it, she was a void. She had spent a lifetime running from the smell of the munitions factory, hiding within the gilded halls of a stolen name, proving that sometimes a lie is the only thing keeping a shattered soul from falling into the abyss. Science did not just solve a cold case, it confirmed what her own soul had known every time she looked in the mirror. She was a woman betrayed by history, who chose to betray a dead girl's memory just to survive the weight of being herself. When the geneticists finally pressed the seal onto their reports, Anastasia emigrated once and for all from the realm of reality into the world of art. On the Broadway stage, she stands under a spotlight in a shimmering diamond tiara, finding her grandmother to the sound of a theater filled with sobbing, joyful applause. Art grants us the happy ending that history so brutally denied her. It provides the closure we crave. A world where the lost princess is found and the wounds of the past are healed by a soaring melody. But let us be honest with ourselves. This catharsis is nothing more than a painkiller for our collective conscience. We buy the ticket and sit in the velvet seats because we want to feel the warmth of the spotlight, not the chill of the grave. While a girl in a silk ballroom gown twirls under the golden lights of the stage, the reality remains frozen in time. 70 meters from a dirt road in the Russian woods. There, in the damp, unforgiving Ural clay, lay the shattered and acid-burned remains of a 17-year-old girl who was murdered with animalistic cruelty. The chasm between the Broadway stage and that shallow pit is the size of an entire century's conscience. We prefer the theatre because the truth does not just hurt, it haunts. We choose the fiction where she escapes across a bridge into a new life, because the physical reality of what happened in that basement, the smell of the gunpowder, the smoke filling the room, and the frantic, desperate moments of a child who did not understand why the world was ending, is too much for a modern audience to bear. Art offers us a way to look away without feeling like we are forgetting. It replaces the jagged edges of a crime scene with the soft curves of a legend. But the bones in the dirt do not care about our applause. They are the silent, stubborn evidence of a tragedy that no amount of music can undo. We have created a version of Anastasia that is palatable, a character we can love without having to mourn the actual person. This contrast is the ultimate irony of her legacy. The more we celebrate the survivor on the stage, the more we distance ourselves from the girl who actually lived and died. We have turned her into a ghost that dances for our entertainment, a spirit we use to mask the darkness of 1918. But as the curtain falls and the lights come up, the silence of the forest remains. The science has closed the door on the mystery, yet we continue to choose the anesthesia of the myth. We would rather believe in the tiara than acknowledge the grit and the lime, proving that, as a society, we are often more in love with the lie that comforts us than the truth that demands we remember the cost of a life lost on the jagged edge of a revolution. The real Anastasia Romanova was never the saint with the golden halo depicted on icons, nor was she the defiant, high-kicking action girl of an animated musical. She was a girl they called Schwipsik, a mischievous, high-spirited teenager who made funny faces in photographs, had a weakness for chocolate, and quite simply, desperately wanted to live. Genetics may have officially closed case number 4, but the science did something far more profound. It returned her real name to her, scrubbing away the layers of grime and opportunistic lies left behind by a century of pretenders. It is often said that Anastasia left no children behind. That is a lie. Her children are us. We are all the descendants of her myth, the ones who for decades chose the beautiful, glittering fairy tale while squeezing our eyes shut to avoid seeing the mud of Ganina Yama or the skulls shattered by bullets. We did not invent her miraculous escape because we were foolish or gullible. We invented it because the truth was a jagged pill that our collective throat refused to swallow. It was infinitely easier to believe in a cartoon princess than to hear the visceral, metallic screech of bayonets breaking against the diamonds sewn into her corset. We chose the myth as a psychological shield, a way to protect our own spirits from the raw horror of that blood-soaked basement. But now, the masks have been stripped away. You know the truth. You have seen the molecular evidence and heard the silence of the forest where the miracle never happened. And so, I want to ask you honestly, who will she be to you now? Will she remain a hollowed-out Disney image, a girl who lived happily ever after in a city she never reached? Or will she become a real symbol of innocence, not a flawless martyr, but a human child we failed to protect, and one we betrayed twice? We betrayed her first by allowing her to be murdered, and we betrayed her again by replacing her memory with a convenient, comfortable substitute. The diamonds in that corset could not stop the steel, and our stories cannot undo the lime and the fire. The case is closed. The science is absolute. But our responsibility to the real girl is only just beginning. Write your answer in the comments. Let us finally stop mourning the legend and start remembering the person. The history is finished, but our memory of the real Anastasia has only just begun.